Welcome to Mostly Security, episode 63. I'm Eric Wheeler, and we have a special guest, Peter Woolley.
Hello again.
And John is out today. Boy, that almost sounded like an official intro to the show. None of this, how's it going?
We still need that music that John was mentioning last week.
that John does not want to do.
Yeah.
So thanks for coming back, Peter. I guess that means I have to say a few nice things about JavaScript.
Well, just because I'm here, you don't need to. But please don't confuse it with Python again.
Touche. Well done. All right. Well, this is actually kind of funny, too, is we got an actual email question from a listener down in LA. I think what we're going to do at the beginning of the show now is do a little Q&A. So if you have a question as a listener out there, or want to throw out an opinion, send us an email at podcast@mostlysecurity.com or tweet us at mostlysecurity, or it shouldn't be too hard to find any of us. So let's do the Q&A. So Brian from LA, a director of IT, asked, what are the security issues involved with using Google, Amazon, Facebook video conferencing devices for work applications? A couple of our senior staff got them at home and want to use them at work.
This is such an interesting question. I am still so terrified to use these things at home. I should have realized that there are more people going hey, I already enjoy this experience. When can I use it at work?
Having been around a while, you do tend to find and hear, either if not at your job, but through other jobs, I've heard anyways, about how the executives bring in some new device and want it accepted into the corporate culture. I think way back when iPhones were just coming out, a lot of the executives had the fancy iPhones, but originally iPhones did not have a way to do corporate device management in the way that IT organizations were used to managing it. So there's a lot of stuff that comes from the consumer side. So I guess to specifically answer this question, there are a couple of things that I would consider, or that you should consider. Number one is privacy. The devices that you're bringing in, they typically have privacy policies that are geared towards a home user and not a company. They collect potentially all kinds of data off whatever network they're plugged into, and will report that back up to whatever the device manufacturer is. And it can pull all sorts of information from your corporate network or your company network.
As I was thinking about this, I was imagining that, while it might be possible to limit some of these calls back to home, as it were, I also wonder if it would either limit or potentially just break features of the devices. I mean, this is just pure speculation. But I can't imagine that they were built with that in mind. Like you're talking about, built for the home, not for the office. It'd be interesting to see someone try this. Maybe not by actually doing. Maybe Brian doesn't actually have to try this at his place of employ. But if he tried to do it, say, at home, think of a locked down environment and see what he could do there. It'd be interesting to see what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, because to your point there, these devices typically are a little more open, or assume your network is a little more open. They're not locked down. They maybe make assumption about what types of ports are available that they can communicate on, which, depending on how big your company is, the corporate firewalls may limit or block some of that behavior. And I think just the sheer numbers of the devices, especially when you get to the big companies, that makes those types of devices a little more enticing to a bad actor to go after and hack potentially. And if something does break, maybe not necessarily the Google, Amazon, or Facebook, but there are large numbers of, for example, security cameras or home, IP, internet-enabled cameras that aren't, the big three there. If they bring those into the office, those may need a firmware patch or a firmware update, and now you as the IT manager need to make sure that those devices are patched. Typically, you're just not allowed to. But the kicker here is it's senior staff, so people who probably have enough pull to tell IT what to do as opposed to the other way around.
Right.
So I guess what you might consider, things you might want to do about that. Well, since they are the executives and they bring them in, you might just have to adjust to what they want to do because, like I mentioned, they probably are the ones signing your paycheck. One idea might be, depending on how large an office or group you have, you could create a separate network. So you have the corporate network, and then you have if you bring a personal device from home and then you don't let those two networks talk to each other, you keep that separate from your corporate stuff and your personal stuff, or the non-corporate network, and that will give you a little bit of a separation in case something happens to those devices or they are hacked, but would still allow whomever to use the device. Even your home routers nowadays have the concept of a guest network. I know my Eros have a guest network, which when the kids have friends over, we make the friends log into the guest network and then they disappear. And I don't have to worry about, not that my kids have friends that are going to be trying to hack into all 100 devices I have roaming around the house, but
it makes it a little easier. And I do think that if a place doesn't already have this kind of personal-ish or internet-only network setup, then this can be the reason to do just that. I think it has bigger applications than just this one thing, so it might be a good reason to do that.
Well, hopefully that kind of answers your question there, Brian. Thanks for the question. And again, if you have any additional questions, podcast@mostlysecurity.com or tweet us at mostlysecurity. Awesome. Well, let's move on to follow-up. So, this one is fun because it's, we talked the last couple weeks, I think, about Apple enterprise applications. Facebook had been using the enterprise developer to put apps on devices not through the App Store. So was Google. And apparently it turns out that there are a large number of, let's call them less
reputable.
Less reputable.
I would say pirates, but
taking advantage of the enterprise app store. So Apple, of course, does not allow gambling or other adult-related apps on their app store. And that apparently is something that enough people want to do that they use the Enterprise App Store certificates and the Enterprise program to get people to sideload applications of the adult nature onto their iPhones. And this is not a singular thing. And again, as we mentioned the last couple of weeks, Apple has to know more. This can't be something brand new. There's all sorts of stuff that should have tipped somebody's hand.
Absolutely. I know several folks have now mentioned that it was a bit of an open secret that both, or that at least that Facebook was doing this. They might have even come out and said that. And I don't know about Google, but obviously they were, as soon as they, I guess, discovered or were told that it was wrong, they came out and said, no, I'm sorry, it's our fault.
There was the ask forgiveness instead of permission. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, and apparently Facebook was just going to keep going, no matter what, because that seems to be their ethos. They moved fast and broke things, including a lot of their internal apps. Whoops. I'm fascinated by the number of what I thought was the only way to get either other apps or, I guess, stolen or pirated apps was to jailbreak. But apparently that hasn't really been a thing for a while. I mean, I think I jailbroke a phone. Maybe it was only the first phone that I had. I think I had a 3GS, and then I don't think I had to or felt the need to, just because all the other iPhones that I've had have done what I wanted to. But I kind of thought, like, if you were using, I think it was Cydia was the was the app that kind of came when you jailbroke stuff, and I didn't realize that it went beyond that. But now it seems like not only is there this seedy or underbelly of piracy and just apps that Apple doesn't like, but it's been going on for quite some time, and it seems like it'll be difficult for Apple to just, like, they can't just ban the individual enterprise certificates, because people can just get new ones, and that seems to be their strategy already.
Every time they get caught, they register as a new company, a new name. There's enough money in it that they'll pay whomever to go register a new company. I mean, companies start up all the time.
Sure.
Not like it's a tough problem for Apple to attempt to solve, I suppose.
Yeah. I will be curious, now that it's been brought to light, I'll be curious to see if they can affect some sort of change that actually solves this, or if they're just going to continue doing what effectively they've done now, which is look at the big folks doing it, kind of give them a couple of days, slap on the wrist, and then hope that the big ones don't do it, and then just let everybody else that's currently doing it, continue on in this kind of cat and mouse game they have.
Yeah.
So I wanted to follow up on, I believe, on something you and John talked about last week, which was your $1 bet on the Amazon, whether the Amazon Eero now, if the Eero beacons are going to get are to become an Echo device.
Sorry.
See, I just
say that line off. Shh, not you.
And you also mentioned at the end, like, who's going to be the Eddie Murphy. And I was thinking, I've been really considering getting one. Like, I've been eyeing it for, I think, well over a year. We moved into a 2-story house from a 1-story house a couple of years ago. And I have a couple of dead spots. Nothing terrible, but, like, I used to use the TP-Link AC 1750. But then I actually recently moved back to my older, like, the older Apple one, and it's not even the newest one, it's like the older one, but I was having such problems with the 1750 that going back, I actually had it's actually working better. It's not as fast as I want it to be, but faster than I could get the 1750. So long story short, I've been really looking at the Eero stuff, just kind of waiting for some sort of sale or bundle. And then here Amazon comes and buys them. And my gut instinct was to go like, oh no, that's bad. They're going to watch everything that I'm doing, I guess. But something that you had mentioned last week, but I don't think you said or didn't go the full way, was you talked about Eero Plus, and essentially that gives you like a VPN, I think 1Password for families, and like right now I'm paying for a separate VPN and 1Password on like the single account, but I'd like to move up. Like my kids are finally getting old enough, and my wife is now like, she likes using it and appreciates it. So like, I think that we can get the benefits from the family one instead of just all sharing the same one account. So like, I want that. And I realized that if they would bundle inside of my Amazon Prime subscription, so I essentially could lob off my annual VPN and the price of 1Password, I think they would have an Eero customer in me. And I was like, once I heard it, I was like, oh, well, that's it. I guess I'm not getting Eero. Let's go look at an Orbi. Let's go think about what's the big corporate one that John has?
Ubiquity.
Yes. I was like, maybe I'll throw a ton of money at their, I think their Unify stuff. But yeah, as you guys went on, I was like, like, I guess I could give it some time. I could see if Amazon does anything particularly bad. Maybe they change that terms of service and it becomes clear what they're going to do. But I think I might end up being that Eddie Murphy in your Trading Places bet.
There you go.
All right. Hopefully nothing too terrible happens to me, but I'm sure one of you will get $1. I'm actually betting, like, I want John to win. I do. Because I think it would just feel like such an Amazon thing to do. But I'm actually, I don't know if they would go so far as to change the design that much for a company they just bought. Like maybe 2020 is just a little earlier than I think it will.
Well, we'll see. We'll see who wins the buck. I'm feeling pretty good about it.
Yeah.
Next piece of follow-up, Raj Samani, was it 3 weeks ago? No, a few weeks back, had a something fun, which was these new Nike sneakers that were internet enabled. And we made jokes about, all right, we have to get some so we can see how long it takes before we hack them. We'll see how long before your Nike sneakers are ransomware, WEAR.
You got a crypto miner on your sneakers. Yep.
And then last, so the NBA All-Star Game was this past weekend, and Nike was pushing these heavily at the All-Star commercials and whatnot, their new Adapt sneakers. And so I didn't account for the option that instead of being hacked or ransomed, maybe Nike just might brick them with an update, which apparently is what is happening. Also, apparently only for people using the Android app.
Oof.
The Nike Adapt app on Google's Play Store is bricking device. It as soon as you get it, it says, oh, you need to add a firmware update to your shoes. Mm-hmm. And there was apparently some shoes that shipped with a compatible firmware update and others without. At least unlike other types of internet devices, you'll still be able to wear your shoes. But all your cool smart features.
Yeah, you can still get to them, right? Or you can still tighten the fit. Okay.
Yeah. You can still, the manual override they still behave as shoes. So, anyways,
that is so depressing. I have a friend that works on he built a lot of the Nike Plus stuff for iOS and I think Apple Watch when it came out. And I know he very much cares about that experience there on the iOS side. And I just realized when looking at this that I don't know anyone at Nike that works on the Android side. I mean, obviously they have some folks. But yeah, I
apparently
wonder if
not.
they're going to... Apparently not enough.
I shouldn't say that.
Right. It's unfortunate, and hopefully they can. I mean, hopefully this will serve to bolster their QA department, if nothing else.
Yeah. So, anyways, because apparently the iOS side has been working just fine, and that's what Nike has been showing it off when they show off the shoes. They show it off working with an iPhone. Just happens to be the Android users are not quite working well.
The idea that in this year, 2019, that we're bricking our shoes is just a hard concept.
That's awesome. Well, I guess that's it for follow-up. And, of course, that can only lead me to my next question. What do you think about pasta? Are you a fan of pasta?
I love delicious pasta. Making it fresh.
Well, this pasta, I'm actually kind of excited about this. Toyota has built an open-source car hacking tool, which is called Pasta. It's Portable Automotive Security Test Bed. I don't know where the
I wonder where the extra A
came
comes
from.
in.
I guess
Pasta B.
Past just sounded bad. we can't call it past. Let's call it pasta.
Well, this is certainly not what I thought, but it is much more exciting, I would say, than pasta.
So, anyways, I really don't have a whole lot to say about this, other than I think it's kind of exciting that the automotive makers who have kind of suffered a little bit over the years of getting hacked and trying to connect things to the internet and having cars turn off and swerve around the road as we go into clearly what is a higher stakes game with autonomous vehicles, that they're hopping up with the security tools and building things. So what this actually is, it's actually kind of cool. It's a briefcase. So it's not an actual car. But it is a briefcase that has their entire automotive platform kind of in it. So you can plug things in, you can tap right into the CAN bus, and it emulates how everything in the car functions all down into a briefcase. So researchers can study, hack, do whatever they want with it very easily. They don't have to go down to the local rental car place and rent a car and then apologize when they return it for why it's not working anymore, So I just thought this was actually kind of cool and they're going to open source it and release it on GitHub. They announced it at Black Hat Europe a little while ago, a couple months ago, and they are releasing it, I think, at Black Hat Asia, which is coming up here in another month or so. So that'll be cool. Maybe get around to playing with that.
And I think having that, like, obviously releasing it on GitHub is, I think, the cool part. The thing that the missing piece for me is, like, this is good for Toyota, or for folks, I guess, trying to test out the security of the Toyota automotive system. I'm curious if other people will be able to adapt the code, or rather fork the code and make it work for whatever it is they're doing, to then make some hardware that people can test with. Like, in my mind, like, the one that I'm most concerned of when I think about this is probably Tesla at this point. Obviously, it's doing the most, and it's the only, specifically the Model 3 is the only car that I've ever longed for and actually think that I will get. Like, there's a few cars when I was a kid. I've never been super into cars, but now that there's electric cars, and specifically Teslas, like, I want one very much. But I have been, like, I've been so dated with my cars. Like, I'm still driving a 2003 Corolla that has none of these concerns, because no one's gonna try to do anything with it, because you can't do anything with it. And I think in the article it mentions that they're doing this because security hasn't really been a focus, and it's always a tacked on thing. So I think the idea of working on this now, of coming up with a way to test it without having the full system, is a great idea. I hope other folks adopt it. I'm curious to see. I'm curious to see other implementations of this. Like, maybe there are other implementations, but they're just not talking about it. Maybe Toyota's trying to get out there, and I guess be a trendsetter and get that code out there, and hopefully allow other folks to do it. I'd like to better understand how my autonomous vehicle is tested personally. I remember, like, thinking, like, hey, how is this going to work? Like, I guess all of these cars are going to have to be the same type of car working on the same system. It's interesting that we're not really going to have that. Like, the way that we are inching our way into autonomous vehicles is everyone's just writing their own code, making it smarter through all the ways they have to do that, and then kind of just hoping that it gets along both with other manual drivers, so people driving manually, and then the other autonomous cars that'll be out there. Like, we're headed into this world in the freakiest way, I guess, if I had to say it that way. And so, yeah, I would love to see if there was, like, a test suite that I could run against my car, just to validate that it indeed has the latest and greatest patches. That could be nice. I doubt that we're going to get there, because I don't think they're going to go from, being, I don't know. I just don't think that they're going to do that great of a job, but this is a good start, and I hope that we can get there.
Yeah, I have to believe that most of the, if not all, the major car manufacturers are going to have to do something along these lines, because the potential for this to kind of find things for Toyota, from other researchers, because the easier you make it for researchers to dig into something, the more likely they are to find something and report it to you and have you fix it. And hopefully they can get some of this stuff before it actually gets into production cars, using this type of kind of pre-built system. So I would expect most manufacturers to start heading down this kind of road. Makes it a whole new world for car hacking.
Absolutely. I wonder if all of these companies are going to get bug bounties, if they don't already have them.
There's a whole other side topic we can do.
Indeed, we don't have to drive too far down that. No pun intended. But yeah, it seems like in order to get these people, especially if you have to, like, say, maybe buy this or rent the actual contraption that is in a car to actually do your testing on, it would be interesting to see what the incentives are going to be around this.
Yeah, or how long before, since the software is going to be all open source, how long before someone builds a Raspberry Pi emulator?
Oh my goodness, yes.
For a car.
It'll be like, I'm currently running Homebridge on a BeagleBone so that I can connect up some of my smart devices. I wonder if there'll be a time where it's like, well, I really want to see if this Tesla stuff's going to work. I better make a fake Tesla on this Raspberry Pi.
Exactly. That's awesome.
All right. So for my topic, I had one question for you. Do you happen to use an ad blocker in Chrome?
So I do not use an ad blocker in Chrome because the previously mentioned Eero Plus comes with an ad blocking service right at the router.
Oh, wow.
So I just turned that on, and I don't see I see some ads, but I see lots of blank spaces.
That's terrific. and unfortunately, that might be what some folks have to do if Chrome goes ahead, moves ahead, and changes the way that their extension API works to currently allow ad blockers to do their thing. So Google recently, I think was it just today or just yesterday, actually partially backtracked on some of the stuff we're going to talk about. But back in January, so far back in January, the Chrome team announced that they were going to introduce this new version of the Chrome Extensions API. They call it Manifest v3. And what they're doing, turns out is actually similar. We'll talk about it a bit later. It's actually similar to what some other browser vendors have done. But they managed to anger pretty much everyone that builds an ad blocker. So they're in the name of security, which is just a fine idea. They're trying to really limit what extensions can do. And if you've ever played with extensions or certainly ever installed a Chrome extension, sometimes you might be surprised at just how much information extensions have. So I think common ones are they can take screen captures and save like a full page screen capture of everything that you have on a page, which is very handy if you need to get a really long screen capture of a very long page, which is very cool. But then you also have to think like, they can see all this. They can add content, they can add scripts, they can run a bunch of stuff. And then the biggest thing I would say they can do is they can inspect and then modify or block any web request that the browser is making.
Or so every inject their own even.
Exactly, inject their own. So this can be used obviously for good. I think ad blockers are the good example of this. I saw actually in the bug where there's the most discussion about this going on. There's lots of people bringing up cases of how this benefits users, how access to this particular API benefits users. And so I think we're not exactly sure what the Chrome team is going to do. So they have a draft of their document that they updated late last year, I think late November, early December. But in the last few weeks since they published that, they've kind of softened their take. But I have a strong feeling that they're going to go ahead and move forward with this change. So what it will mean is if you're currently using an ad blocker that I guess most ad blockers currently take advantage of this ability to choose to block any web request. It's going to change from the extension examining every web request to an extension providing a list of URL filters that Chrome should block. So that's what's interesting is it kind of means that Chrome is implementing its own content filtering system, or it's at least its own content filtering API, and then allowing people to just send in URLs, which I find this whole thing very strange given how Google is itself an advertising company. I feel like this is a balancing act that maybe they're not doing a great job of managing, or maybe it's just optics right now. But what I had not realized as I was digging into this, and I was kind of taken aback because I think Chrome, it's the biggest player in the browser space. Almost everyone I know, like in my family or friends, uses it unless they have a strong opinion on why they don't, whether it's like the visual side of it or they want everything to be in Safari because they have an iPhone and they want all the shared tabs, or they like Firefox because they've just always liked Firefox. Chrome seems to be the default now. So I think that's why most people are as up in arms about this as they are. But what I didn't realize was that Apple has actually already started implementing their own version of this, starting with Safari 12. So do you happen to use any content blockers? I guess you don't have to because you have your Eero. But do you happen to have a content blocker on your phone for when you're not around or not at your home network?
No, so I tried one for a while, and I did not find it actually work very well. Oh. This was probably a couple years ago, though, when they first came out when iOS added the ability to use a content blocker, the content blocking APIs. I tried a few, and they were more trouble than they were worth because they would block sites that I actually wanted to go to, and the only way around it, I found myself turning it off enough that I just said, forget this. Yep.
And unfortunately, that's like that as soon as they brought that to iOS, like I think they've made a few minor changes to the way that it works, hopefully to improve it so it works better than when you last used it. I use one and just kind of don't think about it. I have found there's a little secret. If you hold the refresh button in either Safari on iOS or macOS, you can reload the page without the content blocker actually loaded, but there's no way to whitelist. So it's like as far as I understand, for the rest of the session, it won't load with content or with the content blockers enabled. But I imagine that's rather hit or miss because I'm not sure how many people know that you can actually do that without just disabling the whole system.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so Safari 12 when it came out late last year, and then definitely if you upgraded to Mojave, they actually took the step of disabling the ad blockers that used their version of this filtering that we're talking about with Chrome. And then right now you can manually re-enable them, but the scuttlebutt appears to be that the ad blocker folks think that with the next version of Safari 13, probably released in fall of this year, that they're just going to disable that API entirely. They do have a strategy of telling ad blockers to write full Mac apps that then users can install from the Mac App Store and then use the Safari content blocking API, which works very similar to what Chrome is proposing. So like it might just be that I'm going to guess that by the end of this year, maybe I need to do a Trading Places bet. I'm going to guess that by the end of the year, Chrome is going to either implement this or be on the track to implement this. People will be frustrated by it, but the optics of just allowing an extension that you may have accidentally installed, or maybe an extension that somehow became malicious after you installed it, like someone bought it, put in some malicious code, and then updated it. If that were to happen, the optics of Chrome having to say, like, yeah, we allow extensions to just see everything that you do all the time and then make changes to it. That seems, I don't know, that just seems really bad here in 2019. So I have a feeling that this is going to move forward. I think when it came out, I was like, they're not going to be able to pull this off. But given that they are making some concessions, but not really saying exactly what, I have a feeling that they are going to just make some small concessions. Like they currently say that you can filter up to 30,000 URLs, but Apple allows you to do up to 50,000 in both Safari for Mac and for iOS. So I have a feeling that Chrome is going to hem and haw about this, but ultimately they're going to do it this way, and they're going to land at a filter list, a max filter list of about 50,000.
Don't want to get shown up by the other guy.
Exactly. And maybe they'll make it 50,001 so that they can say they're less restrictive than Apple, at least. But I will say that Firefox remains the best options for folks wanting to have a bit more control of their web browsing experience. I haven't actively been a user on Windows. I still use it. But I've switched totally to Safari for all those reasons I mentioned before. But when I do think about this, I am glad that Firefox still exists. I'm glad that Mozilla still exists. I'm glad that Firefox is going to continue to use its own rendering engine instead of moving to Chromium. I just like that Firefox is still out there, being the competition that I think all of us can turn to when our browser of choice moves away for whatever reason, security or whatever.
It didn't Google, wasn't it just 6, 8, 9 months ago? I don't actually remember. Weren't they going to do something around ad blocking and then backed off a little bit back then because they realized they were essentially an advertising company, and they changed it to, we're just going to block bad ads, and they were going to have some criteria to define someone as a good advertiser behavior versus bad advertiser behavior. I seem to remember something along those lines.
I think I remember being so late to that, to first seeing the mention of that. And I don't even remember if it was that long ago. It feels fresher than that. But I remember being so late to it that there was already the backtrack of essentially, we're not going to. As far as I understand, they have not added anything in that way. And this feels like actually by forcing folks to switch to this new API, which is where you essentially have no visibility into what the user is actually doing. You just have to submit a list that you want to be filtered, and then Chrome does it for you. Like, by doing that, they're actually moving to a single type of filtering. So from looking at the bug, it looks like this is the way that AdBlock Plus does it, but there's several different there's several different AdBlock players out there, and they all have their own special sauce, either the way that they allow folks to customize their filters, or even just in the way that I think there's one that allows you to block certain objects or certain movies if they are too large. So they're probably getting that information from the headers and then choosing not to download something and then presenting the user with the option to download it. And there's security reasons for that, certainly. And there's also great usability reasons. Like if you're on a metered connection, like I only get 1 terabyte a month, which through Comcast, which I tend to burn through. If I was given the option to not automatically download things when scrolling through pages, that's useful to me. And those sorts of features will no longer work as soon as Chrome implements this and gets rid of the API.
All right. Well, on that note, we jump to something fun.
Yes, I would be a little happier if we talked about something fun instead of this. It makes me kind of sad.
All right. Well, I'll let you finish it up. So I'll do mine.
Great.
First, mine is a website that allows you to. It's got a spinning globe, so it's a visual website, and the globe is spinning around. And up in the upper left-hand corner, you type your address in, and it geolocates your address on this little spinning globe. And then there's a drop-down list where you can change the time of Earth, and not like short periods of time. The question is, what did Earth look like 150 million years ago? And you can change that drop-down from, now to up to 750 million years ago. And then you can see your geolocation on the globe where your house would be 750 million years in the past, or, with the tectonics plates and moving around and all that stuff. So if you punch in your address...
I've done it just now. And so first off, can I say the URL for this is dinosaurpictures.org, which is an amazing URL. And then Ancient Earth is the page that it's on. And I'm going to be honest, when I first saw the URL, I thought I was going to see I didn't know what I was going to see, but I thought maybe like dinosaurs walking around with people or something. But this is so awesome. Like, not only is it better than what I thought, but this is amazing, and I'm going to have to spend some time spinning this globe around.
Yeah, and just picking addresses and see where, and it keeps kind of the outline of the United States on the continents and the...
On the plates, I guess it would be.
Yes, on the plates where they would roughly be, 240 million years ago. So you can kind of say, oh, hey, I used to have beachfront property 240 million years ago.
Wow, we were in the ocean for quite some time.
Yes, exactly.
Crazy. Oh, wow.
Exactly. So, anyways, that's my something fun today.
All right, so to finish things up, I'd like to mention an app that I'm surprised I didn't know about. I'm surprised that I hadn't even thought that this was possible. But there is an app called Libby. We'll include the link in the show notes. So there's an app called Libby, which is provided by or created by this service called Overdrive, which used to have an app, or it still has an app. But regardless, Libby is the app you want. And what Libby allows you to do is use your whatever public library system you're part of. You can use your ID or your library number, along with a PIN or password, depending on what system you have. Like up here, I'm in Clark County, Washington, and we just have a PIN that's created for you when you sign up. So I did have to have both of those pieces of information. But what it allows me to do is to digitally check out both ebooks and audiobooks from my library. The library has obviously a limited number of licenses, so in some cases you have to put a book on hold, but as soon as you get it, you get a little notification, it pops up, you can download the book, listen to the book, and then the best part is you can either return it early, or if you forget to return books that you get from the library, no problem here, it just goes right back when your 3 weeks or whatever the time period is has gone up.
It just goes poof, unlike a physical book.
Exactly. I am married to a librarian. She knows that I am not good at returning things, so I tend to not get physical books. I also enjoy an audiobook more than I do a dead tree copy of a book. So I tend to just stay away from the library, even though I'm a huge proponent of it. We love to take our kids to the large Vancouver public library that's down in downtown Vancouver. It's a great spot just to play around. Also tons of books. But this has allowed me to not only read a ton more books. So I think last year I read more books than I've ever read in a year, and I read them all through this app. So you get them for free, or rather you get them for the tax dollars that you're paying. You don't have to worry about returning them late. And if your library doesn't have enough copies, then you'll just get a notification when your turn is up. So I usually have a handful of books checked out and a handful of books on hold, and then they just come to me, which it's really terrific.
This is really cool because I was actually going to ask about Overdrive. I didn't realize it was built by Overdrive because I think this was probably 5 years ago. Our local public library started offering, well, I don't know the exact when they started. When I looked into it, they were using an app called Overdrive, and I remember it being a little bit cumbersome and not actually working well. But it sounds like you have had a different experience with this new app, but it's built by the same people. So I'm thinking my public library probably does this.
Yes, and interestingly, I believe you're part of the Multnomah Public Library?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So there's a great little thing for anyone that's listening around Multnomah, especially in the counties around it. If you are a member of, I believe there's 4 counties that surround Multnomah, you can actually go to any Multnomah County library, I've done this, and get a Multnomah County library card, because they're nice, and if you're in an adjacent county, they will give you a card. And then you can put that ID into Libby as well, and so I can actually switch between the 2 different libraries. If I can't find one book at my local one, I could look for it there. So like your library has, I think it's somewhere around like 30 or 45,000 books, audiobooks and ebooks that you can get. I think the Fort Vancouver Public Library, the one for Clark County, has like 15,000 or 20,000. So there's still a ton of books, absolutely. But I get to pick between both of them. So depending on the area that you're in, check to see if there are other libraries around you that you can also do that with, and then you just get access to a ton of books.
That is very cool. I am going to have to go download this and start adding this because we use our library quite a bit. We use a lot around dead tree books, I suppose, more so than anything else. But if there is a way to make it easier to get the books digitally, I would just as soon use that. So this is very cool.
There's one tip that I'd also like to give out there for anyone that listens to... Actually, I'll ask you. Do you happen to listen to podcasts at more than 1x? Or are you got to stick to real-time kind of guy?
No, I'm the weirdo who actually changes the speed depending on the podcast. Some podcasts I listen really fast, and some I listen at regular speed. So it depends on the podcast.
All right, so this might work out well for you. So inside the app, you do get the ability to change. So when you're listening to a book, an audiobook specifically through Libby, there's just a button at the top that's got a timer, and if you tap it, eventually you'll get to 2x, and then it cycles back to 1x. And for a while I was like, yeah, this is okay. There were some authors, though, that I'm like, I know I could listen faster. I would love it if I could get a little more. And it turns out that while it's not documented very well, if you Google it, you can find that if you tap and then pull your finger down, you not only get fine-tuned control, I think you can go in 0.25 steps instead of 0.5 steps in the speed increase. You can also drag it all the way up to 3x. And there have been several books that I have been able to, at what feels like a blistering speed, to anyone not listening to the book. When I can really get in a groove with an author, I find that I can turn it all the way up to 3x and just burn through books. So there are several books that they're 16 or they're 20 hours, and I'm just not sure that I'm going to be able to pay attention. But depending on the reader, I can turn it up to 3x and then just cruise.
That Yeah, that may work for me. Well, this has been fun, Peter.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. This was fun.
And I think next week we'll be back with John, and we'll see if we get any questions. Or maybe it was a one-time thing. We'll see.
Great.
All right. Have a good night, Peter.
You too.
All right.
Farewell.
Bye.